Last week, about 30 African leaders gathered in Dar es Salaam, the Tanzanian capital. They met with leaders of the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Rockefeller Foundation, and other multilateral development financing institutions. Their mission? To deliberate on measures to improve electricity access for 300 million Africans by 2030. It was tagged Mission 300, and as part of the initiative, the World Bank is pledging $30 billion. Welcome, this is Economy and Market on Business Day Television. We bring you a comprehensive breakdown of activities that have affected the economy over the past week. I'm your host, David Olujimi. On today's show, electricity is the core focus with major emphasis on the renewable energy drive propelled by international donors. We've seen barrages of renewable energy donations from Solar Energy for All to the Nigeria DS program by the World Bank that saw the World Bank commit $750 million to renewable energy solutions for rural Nigerians. Then last week on the sidelines of the African Energy Summit, we saw the World African Development Bank commit a further $1.1 billion to electrifying Africa. This is apart from a $1.2 billion commitment they made to renewable energy programs in Nigeria last year. These programs are the Nigeria Desert to Power Program and the Nigeria Grid Battery Energy Storage System. Essentially, within the context of renewable energy, we've seen commitments of over $3 billion in the last 1 year. Whether these funds are tied to Mission 300 are yet to be spelled out. Also, the performance benchmark for assessing these funds in these initiatives are some of the information that we are yet to access. And on the show today, we have a guest who would help provide clarity to some of the nuances and context behind solar energy drive in Nigeria. On the show this morning, we have Oluwatobi Soyombo, who serves as the head of growth and business operations at Haven Hill Synergy Limited. Haven Hill Synergy Limited is one of the leading solar mini grids companies in Nigeria. They've become quite synonymous with solar mini grids in Nigeria as they've been able to electrify over 20 healthcare facilities across the country. I'm talking about hospitals, primary healthcare center, and most recently, the Ado Mall in Kano, where they had a solar mini grid of 1 megawatt, quite a lot. They were also impressively, Haven Hill was one of the 5 mini grid developers that signed a $72 million agreement with IFC, that's the International Finance Corporation, last weekend on the sidelines of the Africa Energy Summit in Tanzania. Thank you, Oluwatobi, for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure. Good morning.
Okay, please, you would have to be audible a little bit so we can hear you well.
Yes, it's my pleasure, David. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, so let's get straight into it with Tanzania. That was quite a vote of confidence from the IFC. So what are your plans? What are the plans of Haven Hill going forward?
Thank you very much. So as we're an energy access company, and as you know, and as you also said during your opening monologue, energy access is a big problem in Nigeria. Between 80 to 90 million, maybe even more, people in Nigeria at the moment do not have access to electricity. And by that, I'm not even talking about those in the urban areas where supply is a bit intermittent. I'm talking about people who don't even have access to the grid at all. There are villages and communities spread across the country who are not even connected at all to the national grid. So as a company, our objectives are very simple: to connect as many people as we can in as many communities as we can across the country. So what you saw last week is a strong commitment and boost towards achieving that mission. So our plans going forward is to implement a strategy to increase the pace of energy access and close that gap as quickly as possible across the country.
Okay, so now I would want to understand the Nigeria DARES program. Your company is one of the few mini grid companies, one of the few solar mini grid suppliers in Nigeria that are working in tandem with REA, that's the Rural Electrification Agency, to achieve in line with this $750 million. This is a business show so we like to talk about the figures. There's not a lot of publicly available information about the framework of this program. And also, follow up to that question is about, is your company accessing these funds through a loan from our banks in Nigeria, or are the state government custodians of these funds?
So the DES program, like I'll start from, I think that's the first question. So the DES program is a World Bank funded initiative. As you said earlier, it's about 750 million. It has different components, but the three major components would be the solar hybrid mini grid, the standalone solar systems, and then the technical assistance component. So it's funded by the World Bank, but implemented by the REA in Nigeria, the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria. So it's designed as a subsidy for, at least a portion of that is designed as a subsidy for companies, for private companies that want to solve this big energy gap, that energy problem that we have across the country. So, I mean, and it's got a very, very big target. So, for instance, we are aware that they're trying to target about 1,225 mini grids and ensure that over 465 megawatt of new energy systems are delivered over the next 5 years. And that the DES program is also an offshoot of the NEP, which came first. So the NEP was about $350 million, of which companies like ours also access that subsidy over the last three years. So, but over the last 5 years actually, and then that has come to an end. Then, so DES has been launched, which is even bigger. So the framework is very simple. Companies are allowed to identify communities that do not have access to electricity. You build out your systems, and then you claim the subsidy. So that is the performance-based grants component. So there are different components under the mini grid grant, under the mini grid part of the DES. So the PBG is one of it. So where you as a company are allowed to identify any community across the country and deploy your solar systems there, get them connected, build out the distribution network, and then roll out all of the electricity connections, and then you get paid an amount per connection. So, and that amount ranges between $400 to $600, depending on the kind of community, depending on the location of the community. And it is also, interestingly, designed to target the last mile connectivity. So, for example, if you are targeting connections that are in the maybe far north, like the last mile communities in any part of the country that you can imagine, especially the northern part, you will get the upper limit of 600. Whereas if you're targeting peri-urban communities close to maybe major urban centers, you would expect that your subsidy will be much lower than that 600. Now, that's the PBG component of it. There's also the minimum subsidy tender. So where companies, instead of choosing communities that they just want anywhere across the country, the government itself, the REA, already predetermined certain locations and certain communities, and they put all of that into a cluster and share the data, the energy needs in those communities, the details and the demographics, everything for those particular communities, and then invite companies to bid for those to be able to get the subsidy. So, and as the name implies, it's minimum subsidy tender. So the goal there is to find a least cost model of serving those communities. So if 50 companies apply, there's a high chance that the company that requires the least amount of subsidy will be preferred, just to make the entire initiative efficient. So, but there's also the solar home systems component as well. We don't play very much in that space, but it's also similarly designed. So where you also have a PBG component of that as well, where solar home systems companies across the country can also identify communities and areas where they want to deploy their systems to, and for each of the systems that they deploy, they get an amount per connection as well. So that's just a quick summary of the DES program. Now, to come to your follow-up question of whether our company whether we access loans through financial institutions, or maybe if this is just tailored towards the state governments. No. So the DES initiative is primarily aimed at private companies that have a mission of increasing energy access. So it's not to the best of my knowledge, it's not designed for state government or local governments to access. So, but like I said earlier, there's a component of it called the performance-based grant. So where it is based on performance. So it's not a government contract where you just apply and then you get awarded an amount, and like the typical government contract that we know. Instead, you are required to go and raise commercial capital, or use part of your own working capital to build out the systems. And once you've built them out, once you have delivered, you are then entitled to the subsidy. So it's and that subsidy is also designed, it's on a per connection basis. So the fact that you have these large solar plants also does not really entitle you to that subsidy unless you can actually show evidence of the connections that you have. That is, a connection will be equal to 1 meter. So for each customer that you meter, then the government pays that subsidy. So what we have done is that for our first portfolio, which we utilize the first subsidy regime called the NEP. So that for that one, we had to approach a local lender called NIDF, Nigerian Infrastructure Debt Fund, which is managed by Chapel Hill Denham. So we approached them, and we raised about 2 billion naira to be able to of course that's not the total capex, that's just the debt component. And then when we got the subsidy, of course it's an 8-year facility that has now even been repaid.
Okay.
So and that is the same structure for most of the companies that I'm aware of as well. So for instance, we've seen the
So Toby,
go ahead.
thank you so much for that explanation. It really brings a lot of clarity. I want you to just give us a brief breakdown of some measurable impacts that let's say your company through the DARES program has had on Nigerian communities. Can you share a specific success story for us?
Yes. So the DARES program is just launching. So all companies are just going through the qualification process at the moment. But I can talk about impact generally. And since you asked about a specific story, there's a story that I like to share of a woman called Mrs. Blessing in a community called Kigbe in the suburbs of Abuja. When we got to that community, there was no business at all. We didn't find any micro business or anything. When they rely on other communities for basic needs, buying small grocery items and the like. So when we got there, once we built out the entire grid and set up our solar farm, we met this young woman who approached us and said she would love to start a grocery store, but she doesn't have the capital. And prior to this, now it was an idea that she had previously, but she just couldn't afford to set it up. And there was no electricity to even power a fridge to be able to sell cold drinks and the like. So what we did was that we seeded her with a fridge and some startup capital. And fast track 3 years later, we found out that almost all the young women in that community had the same desire as her. And not just that they had the desire, most of them, a number of them have now gone ahead to also set up, their own small business in their own way. And today, Mrs. Blessing is one of our commercial customers. And from just one fridge and a few biscuits and the like, she has now grown her a small business into something that she now lives off. Initially, she was a farmer, but now she no longer has to spend a lot of time on the farm now. So for us, we see that the power of increasing energy access into a community is quite transformational. It changes the entire social demographics of the socioeconomic landscape of any community. And we see this kind of story all across. I can tell you stories of barbers who had nothing before, but whom, again, as a result of being connected to the grid, now have set up a barbing salon, and in addition to that, have even grown that from just one clipper to multiple clippers, and even to the point of hiring new people within the community. We have stories of welders as well. Welding is something you cannot get done unless you have access to reliable grid. So with our presence in those communities as well, we now have multiple welders who have not only converted from their old inefficient systems, now have more efficient welding machines provided by us as well, but of course powered by the grid that we supply. So there are countless stories. We power over 3,000 small businesses across all of our communities, And if I have to, in fact, I can even tell you the story of a pure water factory. You would think that a pure water factory should only exist in a peri-urban or in an urban area. But I can tell you today that we have rural communities, extreme villages in Nigeria today that are currently powered. Pure water factories are currently powered as a result of, in fact, not only that, the guy, I remember when we interviewed, last time we interviewed him, I remember him telling us that it was because of our intervention in that community that actually motivated him to expand the capacity of his pure water factory. And he's one of our biggest commercial customers at the moment. So yeah, time will not permit me to talk about all of
Thank
these
you.
stories, but
So
this is the transformational power of energy access for any rural
thank you
community.
so much. One question I would like to talk about. So captive power plant is there are systems that are very associated with solar mini grids basically, and over the past few days or experts in the line have been talking about how the government should start thinking of these captive power plants to address Nigeria's reliance on our unreliable grid. Our grid is basically unreliable. It crashes like once every 8K market day. So are there plans to what do you have to say? Do you, apart from the primary healthcare center, because I actually went through and I noticed that Haven Hill has quite a bit of footing in the in electrifying healthcare centers. How can you adopt this model of captive power plants to beyond just healthcare facilities to now help industries? Maybe we can have a chain of small scale industries in communities like the success story you just talked about. Is there any plan to look for a model that can now scale up beyond healthcare facilities?
Oh, that's exactly what the plan is, and that is already in motion as I speak. At least for us as a company, that's a very big segment of the market that we are currently increasing our footprints in. You mentioned Adu Biorumo during your opening monologue as well,
Yeah.
that we currently power. That's an example of a large scale. A medium scale, large scale is I mean, it would be way more than 1 megawatt, but that's an example of the differences that you're talking about between a 10 kilowatt system powering a primary care facility and a 1 megawatt powering an entire mall. Adubayoro Mall is perhaps one of the largest malls in, I mean, we hear it's the largest, but depending on the metrics that you're using,
Yeah.
the largest mall in Nigeria. So, and we are currently powering that with a 1 megawatt system. We also have in farm milk, which is manufacturing, which is also large, another 1 megawatt system, farm milk based in your state, which is I think their primary factory with for that region. So yeah, captive power plants I think are the future, especially for companies, manufacturing facilities, warehouses, etc., who have enough roof space or ground space to be able to set up the solar system. So I think that's the future. I think the future of the grid is decentralized. Maybe it's about time that and countries across the world are recognizing this as well. The energy in itself, power generation in itself, started as a decentralized, in a decentralized manner. It was much later. Fast forward a few decades later, that a large grid as we imagine today currently was I mean it was decades later that we got what we have at the moment. So but now I think the world is going back into companies designing power systems to meet their own specific needs, especially companies that are perhaps in areas where the grid is unable, where it's so expensive to extend the grid to them, or sometimes companies that just want to reduce their carbon footprint. I think the best way to go is solar, and we are currently speaking to a lot of these companies, and I think it's a big opportunity for them to tap into this. So yeah, so we have gone beyond just primary healthcare centers or just 5-10 kilowatt systems spread across the country. It's now about captive power for large manufacturing facilities and the industries as a whole. And I think that you will see that the Electricity Act as well, recently passed, will definitely accelerate that going forward.
So before we round up, I want to talk about our high upfront costs. High upfront costs. So basically, solar systems basically have this high upfront cost, but there's a thing about their lower long-term expenses. And one question that comes up is the total cost of your project compared to like a gas-powered or diesel-powered plant. What's the comparison between your, let's say, like you mentioned, 10 kilowatt plant compared to a diesel-powered plant of the same capacity? What's the how do I describe it now? What are the cost differentials basically? Let's say over a 10-year period,
It's
setting up one
huge.
and managing one.
Yes, I can tell you this. So the upfront costs might be high for energy companies like ours. So, but for manufacturing companies and other companies that want to adopt solar, if you talk to the right people, I do not think that your upfront costs are going to be high because what needs to happen, the convention at the moment is that businesses and households in Nigeria at the moment are themselves the power company, which is you go to a generator seller, you buy the generator, and then you fuel it with diesel, and then you start generating your own power. But you have no, as a manufacturing company, you have no business doing that. Instead of pouring, a billion naira into setting up a solar plant, what you do is that you call a company, like New Synergy or any other company that tickles your fancy. You call them and then you sign a power purchase agreement. So they invest their own capital. We would bring in our own capital, set up that solar system for you, and we only sign a power purchase agreement with you. And
Okay.
that power purchase agreement is supposed to then last for 20 years. So if you look at the cost, what you will spend over a 20-year period, it will definitely be cheaper than what you would have spent on diesel. And I can run it. I can go through the economics for you, but I can see that our time is almost
Yeah, our
almost
time
over.
is far
Yeah.
spent. So thank you very much, Mr. Toby Shuyombo from Haven Hill Synergy. It's great to see what you guys are doing, and for our viewers, we look forward to seeing and hearing from these companies and other renewable energy companies in Nigeria over the coming years. Thank you for joining us. See you again on Friday. This is Economy and Markets on Business Day TV. Good morning.